she texted "wish you were here." And I replied "enjoy the hotel." Little did I know, that simple message would stir everything I've been hiding. The day started like any other, but the moment my phone buzzed, everything shifted. The screen lit up with a message I wasn't expecting: "wish you were here." Her name glowed at the top, a small icon that carried so much weight. Just reading it made my chest tighten, a quiet ache I couldn't ignore. She was on a girls' trip, her laughter, her energy, captured in photos she shared like little windows into a world I wasn't part of. And yet, even through a simple text, she reached me. I stared at the words for a long moment, the apartment around me suddenly too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint creak of the floorboards, even the distant traffic outside, all of it felt muted, as if the room was holding its breath along with me. I could almost picture her, standing on a balcony somewhere, the evening sun brushing her hair, the faintest hint of a smile teasing her lips as she typed that message. My thumb hovered over the screen, unsure whether to reply with warmth, playfulness, or something guarded. Part of me wanted to type immediately, to pour in everything I felt but didn't dare say. The temptation was sharp, like tasting sweetness that might burn if I swallowed too quickly. Another part of me, the part that always tried to measure words and consequences, urged caution. I remembered the subtle glances we'd shared before she left, how her eyes lingered just a fraction too long, how her hand brushed against mine in passing, a touch so fleeting it was almost a memory already. Those moments weren't romantic in any overt sense, but they carried a weight that now pressed on my chest with the force of absence. I felt a strange warmth mixed with longing. There was admiration too. She moved through life with confidence and grace, unbothered by the world, while I wrestled with my thoughts in this quiet apartment. Her independence was magnetic, almost intoxicating, and knowing she was experiencing this little adventure without me stirred something inside me I couldn't name. A pang of jealousy crept in, subtle but undeniable, like the cool edge of shadow brushing against the warmth of sunlight. I placed the phone on the table and ran my fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the faint vibrations of memory, the sound of her laughter, the way she tilted her head when she listened closely, the warmth of her hand brushing mine. It wasn't just a text, it was a reminder of everything unspoken, everything postponed, everything I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. Finally, I drew in a slow breath, trying to steady the quickening of my heartbeat. I would reply. But what could I say that didn't betray the storm of feeling churning quietly inside me? "Enjoy the hotel," I typed eventually, choosing restraint over impulse, letting the words be light, casual, harmless, at least on the surface. Yet even as I hit send, I felt the tension linger, a quiet spark that promised everything was about to change. That one text, that simple exchange, was the first small fracture in the calm of our lives, a fracture that would grow into something I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. I stared at my phone for a long moment after sending the first reply. Enjoy the hotel. Simple. Casual. Polite. Harmless. Yet, even as the words left my fingers, they felt heavier than I intended. There was a strange duality to them. They were polite enough to not reveal the tug at my chest, yet intimate enough to remind her that I was thinking of her, noticing her, even from a distance. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies everything, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the muted tick of the wall clock, even the faint rustle of the curtains in the evening breeze. I picked up my coffee mug, letting the warmth seep into my hands, grounding me while my mind wandered in impossible directions. I could imagine her laughing with her friends, hair catching the sunlight in some hotel lounge I'd never see, her eyes sparkling with the kind of carefree joy that made me ache quietly inside. I caught myself imagining small details, how she might tilt her head slightly when listening to someone tell a joke, or how her hand might brush against her own hair absent-mindedly. These were ordinary movements, yet in my mind, they carried a weight I hadn't fully admitted before. The casual nature of my message felt like a mask, concealing a heart that had started to notice, perhaps too late, how much space she occupied in it. A tiny ping startled me, her reply had come. But it wasn't fiery or teasing, nor was it as intimate as I secretly hoped. It was light-hearted, playful even, something about the poolside view or the food they were enjoying. I felt a surge of jealousy and longing all at once, fleeting and sharp, like the brush of cold air against warm skin. I realized that even distance couldn't dilute her presence in my life. If anything, it made her feel closer in some invisible way, more immediate, more vivid. I found myself tracing patterns on the table with my fingers, absent-minded, lost in thought. Every instinct in me wanted to reach out, to bridge that gap with a message filled with warmth, humor, or some subtle hint of how I felt. But caution won over desire. There was a fragile balance between friendship, admiration, and something unspoken, something that wasn't mine to claim so easily. In my mind, I replayed small memories, the brief brush of our hands when we passed objects, a glance that lingered just a moment too long, shared laughter over insignificant things. Those tiny gestures were electric in memory, and now, through her text, they hummed quietly, reminding me of what I'd been ignoring. I looked at the screen again. Her presence was alive in pixels, yet unreachable, and the casual words I'd sent suddenly felt like a gentle tether, something that said, "I notice you, I care, but I'll wait." There was a strange satisfaction in that restraint, a quiet pride that I hadn't let emotion overwhelm me, yet. As I set the phone down, a small smile tugged at my lips, involuntary and fleeting. Even in absence, even in restraint, she had a way of making the world feel warmer, sharper, more immediate. And I knew, deep down, that this casual response was only the first step in a conversation far more complicated, far more intimate, than either of us had anticipated. The apartment felt emptier than usual. Even the low hum of the fridge seemed to echo around me, emphasizing the quiet that had settled since her text. I found myself staring at the phone again, not for messages this time, but for memories, little fragments of the times we'd spent together, moments that had seemed ordinary then, but now felt charged with meaning. I remembered the first time we'd met properly. She had that effortless confidence, moving through the room with a quiet grace that drew eyes without demanding attention. Her laughter had been soft, musical, carrying a warmth that made the world seem smaller, more intimate. I had noticed her hand brush mine by accident when passing a cup of coffee, the brief touch electric, lingering in my memory long after the moment had passed. Small things, almost invisible gestures, suddenly felt monumental. The memories came unbidden, like waves pressing gently against a shore. I could almost feel the warmth of her hand again, the subtle tilt of her head when she was curious, the way her eyes lit up when she shared a story. I traced these recollections in my mind with painstaking detail, as though recalling each nuance would somehow bring me closer to her. Even the scent of her perfume, light, floral, something undeniably her, floated through the air in my imagination, teasing my senses. I remembered a rainy afternoon, sitting side by side on a bench, sharing an umbrella neither of us really needed. She had laughed at something trivial, and the way her shoulders shook with that laughter had been mesmerizing. I had wanted to reach out, brush a strand of wet hair from her face, maybe just let my hand linger for a heartbeat longer. I hadn't, but the memory stayed, vivid and lingering. Even in ordinary settings, she had a way of making everything feel more alive. The subtle tilt of her wrist, the way she sipped her tea with thoughtful precision, the small pauses in conversation that hinted at more beneath the surface, all these tiny details etched themselves into my mind. And now, seeing her text from a distant hotel, those memories pressed against me, reminding me of what I had been feeling, what I had been avoiding. A pang of longing rose in me, quiet but insistent. The realization hit, distance didn't lessen her presence, if anything, it sharpened it. I could almost feel her beside me, the warmth of her hand, the comfort of her closeness, the silent electricity of shared attention. And yet, I was alone, my apartment both a sanctuary and a cage, filled with echoes of moments that could no longer be touched. I traced the edge of my coffee mug again, absently, letting the warmth ground me while my mind wandered further into memories. Every laugh, every look, every accidental brush of skin reminded me that she mattered more than I had dared to admit. That single text, simple, casual, playful, had become a trigger, a doorway into emotions I had kept under careful lock and key. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Memories weren't just recollection, they were a warning, a whisper, a spark. And as I thought of her, far away and yet so vividly present in my mind, I realized that this was only the beginning. Those small moments we'd shared, once fleeting and easily dismissed, were now impossible to ignore. The ache of longing had begun to settle, soft but persistent, marking the first real crack in the calm I had been clinging to. The apartment was quiet again, though this time the silence felt heavier, almost oppressive. I sank into the couch, phone in hand, feeling the weight of the conversation I hadn't had yet, or maybe never could have. Her messages had been light, playful, teasing even, but they stirred something deeper, something I wasn't ready to confront. I couldn't ignore it anymore, the subtle ache that had been growing in my chest since her first text. I ran a hand over my face, brushing a lock of hair back and rubbing at the tension in my temples. The rational part of me told a story of restraint, of boundaries and timing, of the impossibility of trying to bridge the gap between her world and mine. But another, quieter voice whispered insistently, reminding me of the small moments, the touches, the glances, the laughter we had shared. That voice didn't just ask if I should reach out, it demanded that I feel, fully and without hesitation, even if it scared me. I found myself pacing the apartment, restless. My fingers traced the edges of furniture, pressed against the smooth glass of the coffee table, drummed lightly against my thigh. Every sound seemed magnified, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my steps. Even the distant traffic outside felt like it carried a rhythm that matched the erratic beat of my heart. I tried to quiet my mind, focusing on mundane tasks, but every small action pulled me back into thoughts of her. The way her eyes held unspoken questions, the curve of her smile, the subtle warmth of her hand in mine, all of it pressed insistently against my consciousness. I felt both drawn to her and trapped by my own hesitation. Social expectations weighed on me too. She was older, more experienced, independent. I was younger, still finding my footing. Could I really be the one to step into something so undefined, so uncertain? And yet, even as logic spoke, my heart argued louder. The longing, the curiosity, the desire for connection, it wouldn't be silenced. It wasn't just attraction, it was admiration, affection, and something deeper that made the simple act of messaging her feel like both a risk and a necessity. I sank onto the couch again, pressing the phone to my chest, imagining her reading my messages, imagining her laughter, her gestures, the faint scent that seemed to linger in my memory. I pictured reaching out, just a little closer, and then imagined the consequences, embarrassment, rejection, missteps. And still, the pull remained. The inner debate wasn't just about whether to text her back, it was about acknowledging the emotions I'd been avoiding. The truth was uncomfortable and thrilling at the same time. I realized that restraint could only hold me so long, emotions, once noticed, demanded attention. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension settle for a moment, and whispered to myself, I can't stop noticing her. And I don't want to. Even from afar, even with all the reasons to hold back, her presence had become unavoidable. That quiet tension, that mix of fear and longing, wasn't something to dismiss, it was the beginning of a story I could no longer resist. And in that moment, I understood that the next move wasn't just about words, it was about whether I had the courage to let my feelings surface, however carefully. The next ping of my phone startled me more than it should have. I had almost convinced myself that I could survive the quiet of the evening, that I could keep my thoughts neatly tucked away, but her message broke that fragile calm. Wish you were laughing with us, it read, accompanied by a snapshot of her and her friends, their laughter frozen in a hotel lounge bathed in golden light. My chest tightened. Just the words, simple, playful, made the room feel smaller, more intense. I imagined her in that moment, her head tilted back slightly as she laughed, her hair catching the sun streaming through the window, the faint sparkle in her eyes that I knew so well. Even though she was miles away, the effect was immediate. I could almost hear the warmth of her voice, see the energy radiating from her smile, feel the small tug at my heart. I held my phone with both hands, fingers brushing the smooth surface almost reverently. There was a brief hesitation before I typed back, a pause where logic clashed with desire. Part of me wanted to respond casually, to maintain a safe distance, but another, more daring part wanted to match her energy, To let her feel the subtle pull between us even across the miles. My reply was careful, yet laced with something I couldn't fully hide. I can almost hear you. Bet your laughter is contagious. Simple words, but in my mind, they carried the weight of remembered glances, the warmth of shared jokes, the intimacy of knowing someone in ways no one else could. I hit send, and my chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time, relieved that the words were out, anxious about what they might spark. As I set the phone down, I leaned back and let my eyes close for a moment. The warmth of the memory of her hand brushing mine, the sound of her laughter echoing in my mind, settled around me like a soft blanket. I could almost feel her presence in the room, even though the distance between us was vast. The playful message she had sent wasn't just a ping on a screen, it was a lifeline, a reminder that she was thinking of me, noticing me, and that the tension I had felt for weeks wasn't one-sided. The unexpected nature of her message stirred something deeper. It wasn't flirtation in a bold sense, but it was charged in the quietest way possible. Every subtle word, every casual comment carried a trace of intimacy that I could feel in my chest. My heart raced slightly, the familiar pull of longing intertwined with curiosity and restraint. I wanted to reach out, to say more, but I also wanted to savor this small, delicate bridge between us. I glanced around my apartment, noticing the way the fading light painted shadows on the walls, the soft hum of life outside my window. Everything felt sharper, more alive. Her presence, even virtual, had transformed my evening from ordinary to something that hummed with possibility. And for the first time in a long while, I realized how much I was letting her affect me, not just in small moments, but in the way I felt about the world, about connection, about desire. As I set the phone aside, a quiet smile tugged at my lips. She hadn't just sent a message, she had reached into my thoughts, stirred memories, and awakened emotions I hadn't dared to acknowledge fully. And deep down, I knew that this small, playful interaction was only the beginning. Something more was coming, something we both felt, even if unspoken. The hours stretched on in a quiet, almost surreal rhythm, the apartment bathed in the soft glow of the evening lights. I stared at my phone, waiting, not impatiently, exactly, but with a quiet tension that made every second feel heavier, longer. Her reply came at last, brief, careful, yet filled with a warmth that made my chest tighten in the most familiar, exhilarating way. I've missed this, missed you. Can't wait to see you soon. I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders melting, replaced by a gentle warmth that spread through me, grounding me in the moment. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic confession, just acknowledgement. Just connection. It was enough. It was everything. Even in the distance, we had crossed the invisible line that had kept us cautious, restrained, and hesitant. I leaned back in my chair, letting the soft cushions cradle me, and closed my eyes. I could almost feel her there, the subtle warmth of her hand brushing mine, the quiet brush of her hair as she laughed, the comforting weight of her presence that had once seemed just out of reach. Each memory, each sensation, settled over me like a soft, steady pulse, proof that the bond we had nurtured was real, enduring, and finally recognized. The quiet ache I had carried for weeks, the longing that had made every ordinary moment feel incomplete, had transformed into something tender, something promising. I imagined our reunion, the first glance across the room, the gentle smile that speaks volumes, the way our hands might meet without thinking, lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. Even in imagination, it was electric, yet safe, warm, and utterly human. There was no rush, no need to force the future into a single instant. We had crossed a threshold, not into certainty, but into honesty. That was the most important step. I felt a deep respect for her independence, for the careful way she navigated her own life, and for the subtle courage it took for her to acknowledge her feelings as much as I had acknowledged mine. The dynamic had shifted, not dramatically, but irrevocably. I traced the edge of my coffee mug absently, feeling its warmth seep into my hands, and smiled softly. Our story had grown slowly, deliberately, like a quiet flame refusing to burn too fast. And now, as the glow of connection settled over us both, I realized that the slow pace had made it more meaningful. Each memory, each glance, each playful message across the distance had brought us to a place where the emotional intimacy felt unshakable. Finally, I typed a short message back, letting it carry everything that words could safely hold. I've missed you too. Counting the days until I see you. I sent it and set the phone aside, leaning back and letting the calm wash over me. There was no uncertainty in the feeling, no lingering doubt, just warmth, anticipation, and the quiet, steady certainty that we had crossed the distance together, emotionally if not physically. Even in her absence, I felt her near. The connection we had nurtured, through memory, playful texts, and restrained longing, had reached a quiet resolution. And as I closed my eyes, imagining her smile, her laugh, the brush of her hand, I understood that this was more than desire. It was something enduring, human, and profoundly comforting, a bond that would carry us forward, together, in its own time, its own way.